Welcome to the Adoptee Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Melissa Guida-Richards, an author, adoptee, and mom. Each week, we will delve into the nuances of adoption, as well as tips for how to bring up difficult discussions in your adoptive family. And most importantly, we will not shy away from tough topics. So thanks for joining me today, and let's jump into your weekly dose of Adoptee Thoughts. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Louise Shepherd. I was born in Indonesia and I was adopted as a 6-month-old baby, and now I live in Adelaide, South Australia, in Australia. And I've lived here for the last 38 years, so I haven't lived anywhere else. Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about your adoption story?
Sure. So in 1982, when I was adopted, there was my mum and dad, who are white Australian, and their two biological sons and my older brothers. They came over to Indonesia to adopt me. So the whole family went over, and they actually met my birth mother and everything, and spent time with her. So I've been listening to a lot of different adoptee stories, and I'm relatively new to listening to a wider perspective of stories, I suppose. But I feel like in some ways my story was a bit different. I mean, they're all different, but um, the fact that two sets of parents got to spend time together, and the way that my adoptive mum talks about it is that they had meals together. They shared the nurturing and caring parenting of me during that. I think it was about 1 month period. So it was like I guess, a more gentle transition or handover, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So, I mean, the way that my adoption was always conveyed to me, the whole story was very positive, and I know now that a lot of stories aren't all positive, and certainly my whole story, my whole life hasn't been a beautiful set of rainbows and unicorns since being
Yeah.
adopted. But I feel there's some parts, such as that early part with the sharing of caring for me, and listening to my birth mother about, I guess, what was working for me, and what kind of things I responded to, was a beautiful thing.
That is so interesting to me. I've
Yeah.
honestly never heard of a situation like that, even in like open adoptions in the States. How do you know how your adoption was kind of organized? Did they go through an agency?
Well, it's a good question because I don't know those details, but I do know there was an adoption agency that did help. There was an allocated worker, I suppose, that went over with my
Mm-hmm.
family to support them, to translate, to help with that cross cultural communication, and the differences. So it's a bit hard now because both of my adoptive parents have passed away, so I can't ask them the details. um, I've got my older brothers, maybe they might know some more answers, but, yeah, it would be good to know because, as I'm listening and hearing about other adoptees' stories and adoption stories, I'm hearing about how it is a business and trafficking type, situation in many cases, and I'm, not don't think that's good at all. And if we can work out ways of more positive, thorough ways of, I don't know, looking into these kinds of situations, I think we could stop a lot of, the more difficult outcomes up, yeah, of adoption. I don't think adoption's always the answer, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Mm.
I definitely get what you're saying here. And this just makes me curious. Was it a completely closed adoption after you came to Australia, or was it open?
It was actually open, and the interesting thing is that after 2.5 years, my family adopted another child, my sister from South Korea,
Okay.
and her adoption was closed, so it was completely different experience. And like my sister and I are extremely close. We talk nearly every day, every second day, and we just have the quirkiest sense of humor because of our adoption, I think. The dark times, we just have this weird sense of humor because it's just so crazy. We think, how did we get here? Like, um,
Yeah.
and she had such a different experience, and I did ask her if it would be okay if I could mention a little bit about her, the contrast between her and my experience. She said, yeah, of course, do whatever you want. And the differences were that as I was growing up, I received photos, letters, um,
Hmm.
Christmas cards, and things like that, from my birth mother regularly, and I was able to reciprocate. And as a growing up, I was always sending letters and photos back. But my sister, she had nothing, nothing, and that would have been so painful for her to see me receiving all of this communication and contact, and she didn't even have a photo until she was about 20 something. And her mum, actually her birth mum, reached out and to an agency, and they did share one or two letters and some photos, but she had a very different experience. Mm.
Yeah, mine was completely closed, and
Mm.
I was later able to find siblings. And my birth mother through an investigator, and siblings through 23andMe. I took a genetic test, but yeah, I didn't have any contact at all. And so this is just like fascinating to me, and it sounds super cool. And did it have a positive influence on you growing up, since you were able to communicate back and forth with your birth family?
I think that identity part, in one way, I had this very fixed internal positive perspective, in that I was always told how much I was loved, and that my mother, wanted to do this to give me a better life, and that. But just the fact that I always knew that I was loved from both sides, that was good. But in saying that, I do have to say I experienced still a lot of internal angst about almost like loyalty of who. Like, I feel like I should be loyal to my birth country and birth mother, but then I'm very loving and, like, grateful for my
Yeah.
adoptive family. But I spent so many times thinking, years thinking, am I brown? Am I white? Am I Indonesian? Am I Australian? Which box do I fit into? And which direction do I go? Which culture do I try and embrace?
Mhm.
And I was talking with my sister yesterday, and I said, I just realized that what I actually did is I assimilated and camouflaged myself so much that, yeah, that definitely flavored, I guess, as well, how I am as a person today.
Yeah.
And then with that, I felt shame that I was abandoning my roots. But, it's that internal conflict.
Yes, I totally understand 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier for transracial adoptees to kind of fit into the box of our adoptive parents' culture, because that's what we see day in and day out. And those are the traditions, those are the mirrors that we see every day. And if we're not immersed in our birth culture on a constant basis, it's hard to hold on and to learn and to kind of emulate that in our day-to-day actions and our thinking. And I've found myself going back and forth, just like I was raised Italian, but I'm Colombian. I was raised learning Italian, but now I refuse to speak
Yeah.
it. It's just
Yeah.
like I don't know which direction I should go in,
I
because like
know.
I love my parents, and despite like how complicated our relationship has been because of adoption,
Mm.
but I also want to love and be loyal to my birth country, my birth
Yeah,
mother, and that too. So like you saying that conflict, and I think it's important for those listening to realize that it's normal to have these feelings as adoptees, and that we can have the most picture perfect adoption story or the most difficult adoption story.
yeah,
And there are a lot of us out there who are still struggling with our identity.
definitely. That's so true.
Did your adopted parents try to integrate parts of your culture growing up other than just the open communication with your birth family?
They really did. They did their best. I remember being very young, going to picnics with other transracial adoptees, and it would be usually around Christmas. And I remember the toys, the gifts, because we would all line up and get
The
a
best
gift.
part.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I really think it made a big difference having my sister with me, because we weren't isolated. We did feel isolated, but we were together in our isolation,
Yeah.
and we would just look at each other, I think, and we would. It wasn't until we went to school that we realized we were different to everyone else in our skin color, racially, and we just kind of stuck together, but we dealt with it very differently. Anyway, so my parents would take us to these picnics. They would try and give us some books. They had, for me, they had a photo album, an Indonesian, which included all the pictures of my birth mother, me as a baby, them going over to Indonesia to adopt me. So I always remember pulling that out and looking at it. And then, actually, when I was 27, I went over to Indonesia and met my birth mum. And when I was 30, something inside me, I don't know what, I think I've got some kind of ESP or something. Something said, take mum over there, like my mum, adoptive mum. And I said to mum, Do you want to go over there?" And she said, "Oh, yes."
Mhm.
She was beautiful. And we went over there together and met
Mhm.
my mum, like me for the second, well, in my adult
Yeah,
life,
yeah.
for the second time, and my mum for the second time since 30 years. And that experience was so surreal.
Mhm.
Crazy. I had two mums for a couple of weeks.
That's yeah, that
It's crazy.
yeah, I like honestly hearing that, I'm just like, I don't think my adoptive mom would ever be in the same room with my
Yeah.
birth mom.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's so interesting.
yeah, it shows how supportive they were. Honestly feel that my adoptive parents didn't have the selfish wish. In some small ways they did. Like mum used to say, I always wanted a girl, some, yeah, girls with long black hair, I could brush their hair. But overall, they put us first and our needs
Mhm.
first. And so she was always, mum and dad were always saying, open to talking about it, and open to our questions, and open to um, just whatever we wanted to talk about. I didn't feel any angst, but my sister might feel a bit different. So I have to say,
Mhm.
even within the same adoptive family, it can be a different experience. But yeah, the fact that she wouldn't ever push me to take her over there to see my birth mother, but when I did ask her, I could tell she was really honoured, and she was so excited. And she hadn't been overseas, I don't think, since that time first adopting me, and just taking in all the culture and smells and food, everything. We were in it together. A-
Mhm.
and she did pass, yeah, 3 years ago now. So I'm so glad I took that time to do that together.
Definitely. That sounds really special. And I just find it really amazing how she made an effort, such an effort. Like this sounds like what adoptive parents should do
Yeah,
when adopting transracially, like taking those extra steps to incorporate cultural aspects, to being open to discussions that their adopted child can feel open to discussing these things, and then you went on your own to ask her to come. And I feel like a lot of adoptive parents, from what I've read and who I've talked to, they are kind of hesitant to bring up these discussions for fear of creating distance and just like nervousness and that stuff. So it's so refreshing for me to hear an outcome like this
Mm,
and to see how positively it affected you. And
mm.
it also makes me curious, like, were you able to discuss race and like racism with your parents?
Yes, well, we did experience racism. When I say we, my sister and I, from reception. So over here, I don't know what it's called over there, but it's like the year before you start year one, two. So it's foundation or things like that.
Like preschool
Um,
for us.
preschool, yeah, preschool practically, and uh, we started getting pointed out to us that our eyes are different, our skin is different. So we of course went back home and told our mum and dad about this, and they gave us lots of tools and skills about how to cope with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we went as far as learning about like systemic racism, things that I'm really starting to get my teeth into as an adult now,
Yeah.
and my eyes are quite opening up to a lot of things and how these systems didn't benefit our birth mothers to take care of our children, take care of their us, our babies themselves for the long term. So yes, we were able to talk to our parents, and they gave us some strategies and skills to overcome these schoolyard bullying and racism. Uh, but I think again, I think my sister and I were able to deal with it differently. My sister was older when she was adopted. I don't know if that made a difference, but it was also personalities and backgrounds of our birth families and things, circumstances were different. So, um, yes. And also, my mum, as she got older, and we were growing together, she opened her eyes to our Indigenous situation here in Australia. She had this one view that, oh, we took the children because they needed to be helped, and the families couldn't do it. Their children were dirty. They weren't. Sorry, I've just got my 6-year-old son. Where were we up to?
You were talking about becoming more aware of like
Oh yeah.
indigenous.
So mum, I was beautiful to see her learning, her awakening to all of that, because
Mm-hmm.
when she started to understand the policies, the racist policies, and the yeah, the systemic nature of what actually happened, and does continue to happen, she was shocked, and she came home and she'd done some training. She said, I can't believe this. This is actually the truth of what happened. They were racist policies. They took those children based on their skin color. And I was like, yes, mum, you're getting
Mm-hmm.
it. And we kind of
Yeah.
went on this journey together. But to see her evolve was beautiful, because she came from one era and one headset, and really took the time to open her mind to the other factors. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that sounds like what we all really need to do,
Yeah.
right? When we're delving into
Yeah.
anti-racism work and just being open to learning more and exploring. And I feel like as transracial adoptees and growing up in white adoptive homes, like we aren't as, I guess, woke as other kids of color and then later adults of color. And we, even with adoptive parents that are very aware of things, it still isn't quite the same. And I know that I have been doing a lot of anti-racism work and just trying to learn more and trying to check my own biases. And like it it's so
Mm.
complicated, and I find myself feeling so guilty for, I feel like I should be further
Mhm.
along in this journey, and I'm not, and I feel guilty about it.
I can relate. I can relate, because I think we've been given this, I guess, umbrella of privilege.
Mhm.
And I know that I've been whitewashed. I know that I've benefited from these racist structures, and that's quite a
Mhm.
awakening for me to think, hang on. And I saw this really good post about how you can be both. You can benefit from I think it was, I took it from your post. You can benefit from these oppressive systems, but you can also be oppressed at the same time. And all these
Yes, yeah.
dichotomies. And I thought, wow, thank you for validating that, because we're stuck in this no man's land for most of our lives. And as we become adults and mothers or parents, it changes our perspective again. And we wake up to different things. But I think it's okay. I think it is definitely a journey, as I've definitely heard it described as a journey, this transracial adoption thing, because it's never stagnant. It's always flowing and moving and changing.
Yes, definitely. We're always
Yeah.
evolving. And it's just like it's so fascinating to me. Just like growing up as children and then teens, we're kind of
Mm,
protected in this envelope of our parents'
mm,
whiteness. And yes, we can experience racism and microaggressions and just biases from strangers, friends, family. And at the end of the day, when we were kids, we could just claim our parents or have them claim us and be like, oh, well,
mm,
so and so, that's my parent. Look at
mm.
them. Or they can come into the classroom or they can speak up, and then
Yes.
bam, problem
Yes.
solved. That person treats us differently. Like one example, I just remember working at my dad's Italian
Mm,
restaurant, and I went to go sit down a couple of customers. They were on a lunch for business, all in suits and
mm.
whatever. And one of them just starts talking to me in Spanish, like super
Yeah.
fast, and just looking like that look where like he thought I didn't speak
Yes.
English, and he thought I was just like the help and
Oh.
whatever. And I was like, in perfect English, I was just like, can I
Oh.
help you? Like my dad's the owner of this
Yes.
restaurant.
Oh.
And he was just like, oh my God. And everybody was so embarrassed. And they're like, whoa, like you're talking to her. Her dad owns this place. She's not
Yes.
Tina, but I am. But he was just so confused.
Yes.
But it's just being able to be like, that's my dad,
Yes.
immediately
Yes.
changed his behavior towards me. And he
100%.
checked himself, his friends checked himself, and they did a 180. And even like the waitress that I was working with, she was like, are they for real? And I'm like, yeah, that happens like all the time. And now as an adult, I don't have my parents around the corner. I don't have them there to be like, that's my kid, treat her differently. No, I when we grow up, we leave the nest and we're
Mm.
now adults, and the world
Yes.
sees us as
Yes.
people of color because that's
Yes.
who we are, you know? So
Mm.
now I just feel like I don't know. I wasn't prepared enough. I wasn't prepared for not having that shelter. And now, like especially writing and talking about adoption, and not always in a positive light, I
Mm.
can get a lot of hate. And
Yeah.
I don't have that umbrella anymore of parents saying like, "That's my kid, leave her alone." You know, it's just like, no, people are telling me to go back to my country if I'm not happy, and that's
Mm.
that's the type of
Mm.
thing I feel like adopted parents need to understand, is that your
Mhm.
kids aren't going to be little kids always, and they're going to need to
Mhm.
learn how to protect themselves and speak up. And when it's probably when the occasions where it might not even be safe to speak up sometimes. So,
That's right.
and like you said before, it's so nuanced. That just
Yes.
has me asking,
Oh.
wanting to ask, how has your journey grown now, like as an adult, and really exploring your identity more, and now not living with your parents?
Yes. I think I feel like there was how do I say? I definitely feel that I came to a crossroads almost in life. And I don't know how this is going to come across, but this is how I felt and how I experienced that. I would have to either go down the Indonesian way
Mm-hmm.
or the white Australian way. And for better or for worse, I feel like because I lived in this angst and this identity crisis for so long, and it to the point where I honestly I didn't want to live like that life of confusion anymore. So honestly, I think I felt I just went down the white Australian path of embracing that. And I think a big part of that of being a white Australian is acknowledging our history here in this country, which is based on racism. So I'm very passionate about our Australian situation with our Indigenous people, and like I've definitely stand up and have a try and advocate for, but to be an anti-racist. I'm a social worker, so I've worked for 10 years in child protection, and I've seen some different sides, different perspectives to this out of home care situations and what could be solutions or supports for birth families. And um, so within child protection, I've worked in family preservation, reunification, and then the long term orders team. So I've seen a bit of a scope on that kind of system, that system. And I think there's a whole lot of things with my identity. You know, I became a mother 6 years ago. Um, when my son got to the age of my adoptive age, it really hit me in the heart. Like, oh, what was that like for my mother? I can't imagine the situation she must have been in to have to make that choice to give her baby away. Um, I've been like, you know, had some contact with my birth mother still, but recently, to be honest, it's gone quiet. So I'm not sure what's happened, and it's hard because I don't know the language and she doesn't know English that well. It's a lot gets lost in translation, and so I wouldn't know if she became sick or she passed away because she was a bit estranged from her family. So I don't have strong connections with extended family over there. So it's a big thing I think of it is accepting kind of my situation as it is, but still trying to uh, critique systems and try and dismantle and make change where I can, because I see the injustices and I see how humans are really affected. But at the same time, I feel like I am at peace with who I am. I know that I was born in Indonesia, but I didn't have the opportunity to become Indonesian because I didn't know the food, I didn't know the language, I don't know the culture, I know nothing, and I can't change that unless I go over there to live there and immerse myself in it. Then I might have some chance of connecting more in a more real kind of authentic, I guess, way. But I come to terms with that.
Yeah.
I can't change it, and I'm okay with that, but I have this privilege and agency to educate myself, to learn so that I can, examine these different systems and their injustices and prejudices and discrimination so that I can help others. That's just where, because I just felt so unsure my whole life, even with that great support that I had and the great family. I just was tired. I was tired of not knowing who I was, and it's
Yeah.
exhausting, isn't it? Just
It really is. And like I feel like people who aren't adopted don't really understand what it is
mm,
to to be adopted, because like every day there's something that kind of triggers it in my head. Like when
mm,
I go to visit my adoptive parents, I see my grandmother lives with my mom, and then my aunt lives with her now too. So I see three different
generations.
relations,
Yeah,
and they all look alike. They all speak Portuguese because my mom's Portuguese.
right.
So they all make like Portuguese food, and like it's just like that constant thing, that reminder that I'm different.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're my family, but I don't have that.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
they try to include me and whatever, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to learn Portuguese. You know, like I want to learn Spanish
Yeah.
so I can teach my boys growing up. But
Mm,
then, like, I'm stuck. Like at home, I'm just like, okay, let me pick up a class on
mm,
Spanish, or like to take Duolingo or something,
mm,
and I'm just like, there's like a block
mm.
where I can't really get over because it
Yeah.
hurts. It hurts that I don't know the language that in a country that I was born into that
Mm,
would have been my primary language,
mhm.
and I just feel like there's pieces of me that no matter how much I try,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get them back.
Mm,
And I feel stuck between like these places, and I'm trying to fight the stereotypes. It's just like I'm not Latina enough, or I am, but then it's just like, what is a
mm,
Latina?
mm,
And I feel like that's kind of where you're getting at. It's just like, where do we fit in this thing?
yes.
And so I'm trying to come to terms with that. I feel better about it than I did years ago because I've been on this
Mm,
journey for so long that I've been
mm,
constantly in the adoptive world trying to figure things
mhm,
out. But
mhm,
like you said, like having kids, I feel like
mm,
that really did change things, and I
mm,
feel
mm.
there's a pressure for me to keep getting to know my birth culture, because now it's not only my thing that's missing, it's my kids thing. And so I'm interested to know how you're handling that with your children, and if you feel pressure to try
Yeah.
and learn more because of your
Yes.
kids.
It's funny because just this week at school, my boy's in reception, and they had Indonesian Day because they're learning Indonesian language. And I'm really happy they're learning Indonesian because
Hmm.
I learnt German. Well, that's really useful, isn't it? For me. And my boy comes home and starts counting in Indonesian, and I try and make it a positive. I say, "Can you teach mummy? Did you know mummy was born in Indonesia and I didn't learn my language?" And he tries to teach me, and then I said to him on the way to school, I think it was on Indonesian Day, I was thinking about it, and I said, "Do you know what, mate? Did you know that when I grew up, I didn't have anyone in my family except for my sister, and just because we're Asian background, we looked similar, but except for auntie, I didn't look
Hmm.
like anyone." And he's just looking out the window, and then I said, "But do you know what? Now I actually have someone that looks like me." And he
Yeah.
didn't really get it, and he's like, he said someone else. I was like, "No, it's you." I'm trying to just gently introduce to him about my adoption because to him, he just sees everyone and he has his family and they love him so much and just like normal family would. And uh, like that. But I do need to introduce these topics to him because one day he will
Yeah.
realize, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm not, different in my skin color and things." Uh, but I do feel pressure that I don't have that to give to
Hmm.
him, and I think we will maybe go on the learning
Yeah.
journey together. Um, and that's the best that I can do is maybe when he gets I was thinking in a couple of years I'll take him back to Indonesia, and he does notice that there's another boy in his class from a different background, and he says, "Oh, we have the same brown skin," and we have, he's starting to
Yeah.
notice those differences, but yeah, I definitely want to just try and embrace it for what it is. And I've definitely had a lot of feelings of shame growing up, and even now about. I try not to. I try not to latch on to that feeling because it brings you really
Hmm.
way down. And maybe some days that it's easier than others to not latch onto that. But um, I want to try and make it into a positive where it's a journey for us to learn Indonesian together, and I see how far we can go with that. And if
Yeah.
he wants to, like, I'll definitely want to try and give that same platform if whenever he's ready, whatever he wants, let's do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a great
yeah,
plan, and like similar to what I've been trying to do. And
mm,
I think I need to find a book or something to try to introduce the concept of adoption, because like right now his grandparents are his grandparents, he has no idea
mm,
that they're technically, like
mhm,
there's adoptive
yeah,
grandparents, I guess. But how to explain that he has three grandmas out there, not just just the two. So I
yeah.
just
I think that's a great idea for a book. If there isn't already out there, we need that book in our community.
yeah.
Because I've got a picture of my birth mother, and it's amazing how much we actually look alike. And I showed Jacob. It's another way of slowly introducing to him. And I said, "Who does this look like, Jacob?" And he just said it was me. And I said, "Well, I don't think I look that old yet, but we do look the same."
Oh my god.
and and he just kind of, accepted it, and
Yeah.
then I'll just keep on chipping away, giving him those opportunities to ask and talk, and yeah. So I'd love to read that book, have that book, because I read to him every night, all different books, and I would love to have that book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there definitely needs to be like more adoptee literature by adoptees, because I
yeah,
feel like having these things are so necessary, because just this discussion with you, it just is a reminder that adoption doesn't just stop at us. It's going to affect our kids in some way. It
yeah.
affects everything. And so we need to keep talking and figuring things out together.
Mm,
And I feel like
definitely.
having other adoptees to talk to really just helps us process things, and like just talking about race and the struggles that you had with identity, it makes me feel less alone, because I'm just sitting by myself with my husband, like he doesn't really get it, but then I'm just feeling horrible that why do I feel this way, like no one else does. And then I talk to you or a different adoptee, I'm just like, there's other people experiencing this, I'm not crazy.
Of course. It's really validating, and it's like acknowledging those deep seated emotions that are within us as adoptees. Yeah, I think it's really validating, and it's really empowering, because we're not alone. Each story is different. There's no wrong or right way to feel. I think that's an important message, and it can change from day to day, from season to season, and that's okay. And I agree with having that support network is everything, and just feeling like it's okay to be who you are.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm really keen to keep learning and listening and hearing adoptee voices, all different experiences. And thank you for giving this platform, because you've been able to raise a lot of different voices and have some wonderful conversations. It's so important. It's invaluable.
Thank you. Yeah, I've really been enjoying it, and just like the different stories from adoptees and the different experiences. Some of us have had like really pleasant ones, and those always makes me extra happy because mine wasn't the greatest. So I always like to hear other people having good experiences, and then the other ones are like heartbreaking, and it's just
Mm,
interesting like how we all can relate on some level. And I'm just curious too. Like you said that you kind of live in the same area where you grew up. Is that like a primarily white area, or like what's the population like over there?
It's certainly changed since the early 80s. Let's say when I went to primary school with my sister, there was only one other Asian girl. And yeah, so we were the two. And I don't know if there was anyone else that was transracially adopted. Not that, certainly not we were aware of, but there were three in total. And there weren't any there was not very, it's definitely predominantly white, to answer your question. And now, though, my boys at school, there's a bit more multiculturalism, but not as much as in the northern suburbs. Well, we're in the southern suburbs of Adelaide. There's more multiculturalism and mix in the north, but it's changing here. And when I started high school, there was a girl. Actually, she was adopted by an Asian girl by a white family, and the lady said, she was helping us with our uniform. She said, "Oh, look, there's another Asian girl you can play with, or something."
Oh my
We were
gosh!
just like, "Oh, that didn't feel good." Like, why are you putting us
Yeah,
in that
yeah,
box? We don't all just like
yeah.
each other because we look brown or something, you know. Uh, I guess she was trying to be supportive, but it just came across so I don't know.
To me, that's kind of like a
Yes,
microaggression. It's just like, you're Asian, go hang out with her.
yes, exactly,
Like, why can't I go hang out with the white kids?
exactly. Um, and also I have to say, that my friends are all white. I don't actually have any Asian friends or people
Mm.
of color. Oh, no, wait. I do have a few now. Sorry to my friends if they listen.
They're like, hey, what about me?
Mainly growing up in my junior primary years, I didn't. And as I've went to university and expanded my wings a bit, I do have some beautiful friends of color, all different. But my white friends would always say, when I'd say, but I'm not Asian, but I'm not white, they would say, Louise, we just see you like us. And that color blindness, I'm like, but you see me like you, but look at me, I'm not. Like, yeah, clearly you might, how can that be the case? And they say, well, you talk like us, you thing, blah blah. Yes, okay, I've been assimilated. But you don't get it when I go to a party or something when I was younger, and you get all these racist taunts and slurs, and you don't have to deal with that. And it's just easier to say that you see me like you, because then you don't have to face what I'm facing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and people will say, "Oh, you sound more Aussie than me," and you get the things like on the phone, "Oh no, that wasn't you that rang up." When I go there in person to collect whatever it is, it was a woman named Louise, and I say, "It's me."
Yeah,
I've just
the name.
yeah.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's there's a lot more. I think even business owners and families in our community now, but it's pretty slow to change. I think there's still definitely racism, um, and I'm trying to get my teeth into the book White Privilege at the moment to help me deepen my understanding of why it's hard to talk about racism in white communities and for white people, many white people, but
Mm-hmm.
it's helping me to open my eyes as to why there's such a blockage. And it's quite complex. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, which
it definitely is. We really didn't talk about race growing up, and I became very aware when I was a teenager. And it's funny how you mentioned like you hung out with primarily white kids. I didn't. Like
oh
my best friends are always black or other Latinos, and it's
oh
funny because I didn't find out I was adopted until I was 19, and so I thought I was white, like literally thought I was white. So the
yeah
fact that I always gravitated with other people of color, and then I found out I was a person of color, it was so interesting to me. It's just like I think like part of me always kind of knew, and that's why I kind of gravitated towards other people, and
yeah
it drove my family bonkers because they're super Republican Trump fans, and they
mm.
wanted me to just hang out with like other Italian people, and I just
Yes,
did it. I just found like camaraderie with other
yes.
people because they were treated like me. Because even though at the time, like I thought I was Italian, I was treated like I was
Mm,
Latina, and like so other people would pick on me. Like in the store, people would talk to me in Spanish, and just like all these other things. The only other people who understood what that was like were my Latino friends and my Black friends,
mm,
and so growing up I went to college, like you mentioned, like exploring more of identity, and I tried to join like, Latino groups, and then I just felt like an outsider even more, and it's because
mm,
I feel like I'm not Latina enough, and then but I'm not
yes,
white enough. Like I'm too woke for my white family, and yet not
yes.
assimilated to the traditions and everything of traditional cultural like heritage of my birth family,
I
and
know.
like you said, it's complicated. It's complex, and then having those discussions with my mom and just other family is difficult because a lot of them have not experienced racism. And like even my adopted brother, he's adopted too from Colombia, but
Mm,
he doesn't
mm, mm.
talk about adoption at all. And he really doesn't talk about race. And like we're not close at all. And yet he's supposed to be the person that I should have been able to talk about these things with. And so it's just interesting to me like how relationships between adoptees are, and
Yes. Could I ask Melissa, when you do talk to, what's the kind of response you would get from your brother and your parents if you did try and raise it about what you experience? Is it brushed off, or
Uh,
is it?
with my parents, like it used to be, oh, just ignore those people. They don't know what they're talking about. We love you. That's all that matters. And over
Mm,
the years, like I've really tried like a few times to them to really
mm,
understand, and we've had some deep conversations. But
mm,
you've probably seen on the news like Black Lives Matter protests and whatever. So I tried broaching it a few weeks ago,
mm,
but
mm,
I got in this huge fight with my father
mm,
because he really doesn't believe racism exists, and he's just colorblind. He worked hard. Like both my parents immigrated to the United States when they were younger, and they worked from like literally nothing to what they have now. So for them, they're like, I struggled.
mhm,
I didn't even speak English.
mm,
If my life was hard too and I did it, you should be able to. And they don't really understand systemic racism. So
mm,
at that point, I've really
mhm,
stopped talking to my father about it because I just realized like he's not going to change. Um, and but with my mom, like she understands a lot more.
mm,
Like she listens to the podcast and she'll read what I write, and she's trying to learn little by little. And I know it's harder for her because she was raised with that type of
mm,
mentality too. And my parents never even saw like a black person until they came to the United States when they were like
mm,
12, you know? So like they were super sheltered. And I think it's
mhm,
important for people to realize that this
mm,
type of stuff is like ingrained, the white privilege, and it's like in your day-to-day life, and it's so hard to become aware of it
mm, mm,
that like even me as their daughter, and I'm a person of color,
mhm,
and like seeing the things that my parents experienced, like even though they
mm,
struggled, that doesn't mean that it was as hard as it could have been if they were people of color, and that they did have advantages. My dad, he has a temper, and
mm.
if a black person did any of the things that my dad did, getting in fights, and like as a teen, he opened the fire hose in his school. Like he would have been arrested or worse, but never,
Mm,
never got in trouble. So like it's things like
that's
that
right.
that
Mm-mm.
um they just don't realize. And so like I, as an adoptee and as a person of color who
Yet,
wants to kind
yes.
of help my family understand more, I have to fight with the part of me that wants to teach, wants to educate, wants
Mm,
to help people become more aware, especially since my children are, I have two Latino children that are brown, you know, like they're going to grow up and experience things like this in the United States. And I want
that's
my
right.
parents to kind of realize that so they can be aware and kind of help protect my kids, you know? But it also have to fight with a part of me who's just like, I can only educate them so much before it's affecting me negatively, and
Mhm.
and it's like talking to a wall sometimes, and that can be really painful because that brings up a lot of trauma, you know?
Right. 100%, 100%, and even with, I have to say, even within my own family, my 2 older brothers are beautiful, but, I'm it's a I find myself educating them too, and I've been surprised recently about some of their perspectives, on some of this Black Lives Matter stuff and racism
Mhm.
in general, and, I was very I didn't until you start uncovering and talking about it, sometimes you don't even realize that there's just these views that sit there, these perspectives that are there, until you have these conversations. I've been a bit shocked, and I think I've heard on some of the other talks that you've had that it shouldn't be just up to us to educate everyone all
Yes.
the time, like you say. And it impacts us. It
Mhm.
drains us, and it's exhausting
Yeah.
and painful. So we have to really look after ourselves, and I think that's a big one as well. Self care, doing whatever it is that we need to do to preserve our well-being, um, be gentle with ourselves and do the it's you can't really express, you can't underestimate the impact of that, because what I think one thing I've thought along the way of life is that, like, no one else is going to look after me. I think that's a big part of my personality now, and maybe while I'm still single. But no one's gonna have my back. I have to do it myself, and that includes looking after myself in those kind of scenarios too. Where we can't educate everyone all the time. We sometimes just have to look
Yeah.
after number one.
Yeah. I think
Mm,
that's definitely
mm,
important. And like you said, you can have these conversations with your brothers and like siblings and whatever, but at the end of the day, we have to put up
mm,
barriers too, because if we give our all 100% of the time, we're gonna get overrun, and it's we need to think of it as
yes.
like a marathon. Like we gotta we gotta save our energy for what, and leave some for ourselves. And at the end of the day, like,
Yes.
still we're going to keep experiencing racism and these things throughout our lives. So like it's like we have to
That's
have
right.
those reserves.
Exactly. I like that analogy of a marathon. It's true. It's not a 100-meter sprint or whatever you call it over there, but 100. It's a marathon,
Mhm. Yeah.
and we'll probably never be completely finished.
Yeah.
We'll pass it on to our, as you say, our children.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And then just having conversations like these, like I know I'm repeating myself, just making sure
Mm,
that we are opening up lines of communication and creating friendships that validate all the things that we're going through will help and strengthen us and give us more energy to have those tough conversations with people who aren't quite there yet. And that means like we can
I
come
agree.
back to them at another time, because 6 7 years ago I was not able to even have a conversation with my adoptive parents.
Mm,
Now it's a
mm,
possibility, and we're making some progress. And yeah, not
mm,
everybody should have that type of patience with certain people, but like if you have an adopted parent or a sibling or a cousin, whatever, who are really important to you, I, like some
mm,
people in therapy, like I've heard, like, oh, just don't talk to them. But it's not always possible just to break up those relationships, and especially as a transracial
mhm,
adoptee, we love a lot of white people who don't really understand white privilege. And if we
yes,
cut
yes.
off everybody who ignores and is colorblind, we wouldn't have very many people left.
It's so true. It's so true. So with the it is, that's, and then there's the hard
Mhm.
work again.
Yeah. So, I don't
Um,
know. We're I think we're making progress as a generation in general, and I really love how outspoken we are becoming as adoptees, and like we're kind of taking back the narrative, right? Because like it used to just be
yes,
white adopted parents in the media and podcasts and books and whatever, but now we're kind of
yes,
taking ownership of our stories and not just letting it
mhm,
be told by them. And that's the beautiful
yes.
thing, like that's how we're going to make change together, and we're stronger together.
I agree. It's quite inspiring to be part of and to listen to these conversations, and the empowering of the children. I see us as children, of the adoptees, adults, and all of that. I think it's great. So I'm really looking forward to continue that journey and having my mind opened more and more, reading some more books and things
Mhm.
like that.
Well,
Mm.
thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you enjoyed your time with us.
I really have. Thank you so much, Melissa, and it's great to connect from the other side of the world as well.
Yes.
And I think it's fascinating, all the different countries, all the different adoptees that are sitting in their lounge rooms or whatever they're doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting thing as well. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It's been fantastic, and I'll keep following all your work.
I'm so glad that you joined me today. And if you would like to hear more from Adoptee Thoughts, make sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you'd like to learn more about me, you can check out my website, adopteethoughts.com. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.